In the late 1790s, revolutionary France, crowded Paris streets were breaking down, not only from war, but because money no longer worked in daily life. The French revolutionary government printed paper assignats with seals and signatures, flooding 18th century markets as prices rose and savings disappeared. Inside wooden Paris shops and rural farms, people rejected paper notes, hid grain sacks, and watched unpaid soldiers wait in worn revolutionary uniforms. When Napoleon Bonaparte took power in post-revolution France, he did not begin with battles. He began by rebuilding the broken money system. Napoleon understood a simple truth from Roman history and modern Europe. Armies need trust, and trust survives only when money feels solid and predictable. This is History and Society, where we explore how systems quietly shaped civilizations long before people understood what was happening. Part 1. Revolutionary France and the Collapse of Trust in Money. In late 1790s, revolutionary France, cracked Paris streets and shuttered workshops showed a country breaking down because daily money stopped working for normal people. After years of revolution, the Paris government still issued orders, but food markets and local trade were already slipping out of control across France. Paper assignats, stamped with revolutionary seals and printed on thin sheets, flooded French pockets, yet the paper value fell every single month. In Paris, open-air markets, bread sellers rewrote chalk prices repeatedly, and families carried thick stacks of paper notes for one loaf. Inside wooden shop stalls, shopkeepers held assignat notes to the light, then refused them, asking for coins, candles, or soap instead. In rural French villages, farmers hid grain sacks under floorboards, because paper money could not be trusted by the next harvest season. Across provincial towns, barter returned as people traded eggs, cloth, and tools, because assignat paper felt like a losing gamble. In narrow alleyways behind Paris taverns, black market traders swapped food and fuel quietly, avoiding official paper notes and officials. French soldiers in worn revolutionary uniforms waited in stone barracks, unpaid for weeks, watching paper wages buy less each day. The revolutionary state answered with printing presses, producing more assignats in Paris, hoping fresh paper would calm panic and hunger. Instead, every new print run pushed prices higher, and fear spread through city streets, village squares, and crowded church steps. In town halls across France, tax collectors returned empty-handed because citizens refused paper payments that collapsed before the next week. Local courts struggled to settle disputes because contracts written in assignats changed meaning as prices moved faster than laws. Merchants stopped long journeys between Lyon, Paris, and coastal ports because no trader could predict costs for carts, guards, and storage. At river ports like Bordeaux and Marseille, cargo sat on wooden docks since trade slowed when nobody trusted payment terms. Gold and silver coins vanished from circulation, hidden in clay jars, sewn into clothing, or buried in gardens behind farmhouses. French families learned the painful rule of money. Money works only when everyone believes the same value at the same time. By 1799, France still had flags and armies, but the money system was barely functional in shops, farms, and ports. Economic fear replaced planning, and survival replaced growth, as families bought only essentials and delayed every future decision. Each political shift in Paris weakened confidence again, because leaders promised stability but could not stop prices from climbing. Crowds blamed printers, merchants, and ministers, yet the real damage was broken trust, spreading like smoke through every marketplace. Assignats became a symbol of betrayal, because the paper looked official, but failed, at the moment families needed it most. Amid this chaos, one man studied the crisis through ledgers, army payrolls, and city reports, looking for one control point. That man was Napoleon Bonaparte, and he believed power meant making money stable before asking people for loyalty. Napoleon's next move was not a battle, it was a financial takeover in Paris that would force trust back into France. Part 2. Napoleon's financial takeover and the return of order. After the coup of 1799 in Paris, new officials walked into ministry rooms with wax seals, ink pens, and ledgers because money chaos had to end. In early 1800s, France, the state tightened control over printing presses, so paper notes could not be produced by panic or political shouting. Inside a Paris Treasury office, clerks counted receipts, stamped documents, and copied numbers by hand to rebuild a system people could actually trust. The government reduced random note printing, so French markets in 1800 could stop reacting like a fire each time new paper arrived. A new central bank was planned in Paris in 1800, with guarded doors, wooden counters, and iron safes meant to protect national credit. When the Bank of France opened in 1800, bankers and officials used signed forms and sealed packages, so lending and payments followed fixed rules. In Napoleonic France, the state pushed stable accounting, using written budgets and monthly reports instead of emotional speeches about revolution and virtue. Tax collection was rebuilt across French departments in 1800, with printed registers, local offices, and clear deadlines that removed old loopholes. In provincial town halls, officials posted tax notices, collected coins and notes, and issued stamped receipts that citizens could keep as proof. Courts in early 1800s. France enforced contracts again, using paper files and courtroom orders because money values stopped changing every few days. Merchants in Paris, shops, and Lyon warehouses accepted payments more calmly because pricing boards did not need constant rewriting like before. Army suppliers in French garrisons delivered boots, cloth, and food barrels because payment schedules became predictable and contracts became enforceable. In military depots near the Rhine frontier, wagons moved with flour sacks and cannon parts, backed by payments that held value long enough to plan. Soldiers in early 1800s barracks received wages they could spend in taverns and markets, instead of watching paper pay lose value overnight. Gold and silver coins returned slowly in French streets because people stopped hiding them in jars, walls, and buried boxes behind homes. The government limited credit carefully, using banknotes, reserve records, and strict signatures, so lending expanded without restarting the old printing disaster. In Paris, bank offices, loan decisions used paperwork and collateral lists, not political loyalty tests, which made business feel less dangerous. Confidence came back through routine in 1800 and 1801, as the same payment rules worked again and again, without sudden reversals. Shopkeepers in stone market halls began trusting prices because rent, wages, and bread costs stopped jumping in wild steps each week. The state proved control by paying obligations, using treasury chests and registered transfers, before demanding more taxes from tired citizens. With stable money, France in the early 1800s could finally plan large spending, because budgets meant something and credit could be measured. Every stable transaction strengthened authority, because people obey faster when the system feels predictable in shops, courts, and pay offices. Behind closed doors in Paris, war councils, maps and supply lists appeared beside financial ledgers, linking money discipline directly to military planning. This new stability did not reduce ambition. It increased it because a funded state can attempt things a broke state cannot even imagine. Now the question was not whether France could function again, but how far this controlled money machine could push war across Europe. Part 3. Stable money. Built the empire. Endless war. Broke it? With money finally stable in early 1800s, France, the government could plan war spending using paper ledgers, sealed orders, and counted coin reserves in Paris offices. In Paris war rooms, officers spread maps on wooden tables and matched every marching route with written supply totals for bread sacks, horse feed, and musket cartridges. Across northern Italy and Central Europe, French columns marched on dirt roads because paid wagon drivers kept moving, and paid soldiers stayed disciplined inside camp lines. At army camps beside rivers like the Rhine, cooks boiled stew in iron pots, while quartermasters checked lists showing rations promised and rations actually delivered. In French arsenals during the early 19th century, workers forged cannon parts and musket barrels because state payments arrived on time for metal and labor. In textile workshops in cities like Lyon, tailors stitched uniforms in batches because fixed prices and reliable contracts made production possible week after week. Stable currency changed behavior in markets because merchants accepted payment without panic, and transport contractors agreed to move food barrels and gunpowder crates. In occupied towns across Europe, officials demanded taxes and supplies using written receipts and guarded chests, turning local resources into fuel for continuing campaigns. This financial order let France fight longer than many rivals, because armies need daily cash flow for wages, medical care, and replacement boots and horses. Each new campaign also raised the bill because distance increased transport needs, and every extra frontier required more wagons, more depots, and more paid guards. On long routes through Spain, mountain roads and raids broke wagons, forcing new purchases of wheels, horses, and tools, all paid from the same state system. On routes toward Eastern Europe, cold seasons destroyed food stores, so commanders ordered new grain shipments, new coats, and more firewood for thousands of tents. Finance supported power, but war consumed power, because every victory still required constant spending on hospitals, ammunition repairs, and fresh recruits. In Paris counting rooms, clerks could total receipts and expenses, yet paper numbers could not replace missing men, missing horses, and broken morale after hard marches. As fronts stretched, supply lines grew thin because carts moved slower than demands, and local fields could not feed every camp without stripping communities bare. When losses increased, recruitment needed cash bonuses and equipment, meaning more spending on rifles, uniforms, and training grounds across French departments. Enemies learned to target depots and roads, and each burned storehouse meant urgent replacement orders, urgent payments, and urgent movement of guarded supply convoys. Even with stable money, confidence weakened when results turned against France, because citizens noticed funerals, empty workshops, and rising taxes in their own streets. By the later years of the wars, the system that created control became stressed, because too many fronts demanded too much, too often, for too long. The arc ends with a simple rule shown in early 1800s Europe: stable money can build an empire quickly, but it cannot protect an empire from overreach. When spending outruns real resources, money becomes a pressure tool, forcing harder taxes, harsher collections, and more resentment in towns and villages. When resentment grows, loyalty weakens, and once loyalty weakens, even well-funded armies struggle to hold ground, hold allies, and hold discipline. So France proved a hard lesson for later states. Strong finance is necessary for power, but finance alone is never enough for lasting rule. In 1814, Paris itself faced invasion fears, with barricaded streets and hurried paperwork, showing that even organized money could not stop military collapse. If you want more stories where money decides history, like this video, subscribe to History and Society and share it with someone who enjoys real facts.